Many, many times people will say, why in the world would anybody want to go to such a cold place as Antarctica? And I can tell you, first of all, that I've never been as cold in Antarctica as I have been at 120th and Broadway in Manhattan. I've been colder there. When you're in Antarctica, you're dressed for it. The weather is quite mild there in the austral summer, in those months of, say, December, January, February, into March. And it is a once-in-a-lifetime journey. It is the closest thing I describe to others. It's the closest thing to doing a visit to another planet. And it's a planet of incredible life forms and incredible beauty. Humans don't belong there. We are just visitors at the end of the Earth. But it is, as I say, the closest thing to going to an area of surreal, otherworldly beauty. In the austral summer, the extended hours of light produce a bloom of zooplankton and then up through krill, and provide for incredible concentrations of bird and mammal life. And we get to see that when we visit that. There's no question that we'll be seeing the wildlife. In the world, the only thing that the other locations where you know that you're going to see this sort of concentration of life would be the Serengeti, or perhaps Galapagos, or much less accessible the North Slope of Alaska. But in the Antarctic Peninsula, you can experience those number and diversity in part of wildlife. And very important, why should tourists go there? Not only to experience that, but to raise awareness of the importance, the vulnerability of this area, and the importance to the worldwide climate. So we like and we must increase awareness and therefore ensure protection of this special place on our planet. I work with an expedition team. Some of these I have to laugh when I see them up here, but I've had a great pleasure of working with the expedition staff over the last 12 seasons, and they're just familiar colleagues up here, ranging from Juan Pablo, a specialty in mammal life, Jonathan Green, and a Galapagos and Deep South photographer. Photography is a big part of an expedition to Antarctica, and we have an expert there to sort of guide people through the difficult lighting conditions that we see. Trevor Potts in the bottom left-hand corner. Trevor's quite, I would say, a famous and infamous Antarctic character. He's significant in the history of Antarctica. He recreated Shackleton's voyage on a size recreation of the James Caird and sailed unassisted, unaccompanied, not under power, from Elephant Island to South Georgia. So he tells tales of that and presents the history of Antarctic exploration. One of the main things that attracts people, of course, to Antarctica is the wildlife. And yes, people ask on the way down, will we see penguins? And we do see penguins, not by the singles, not by the dozens, but sometimes by the thousands and even the tens of thousands. There are, 17 or 18 species of penguins worldwide. We can expect to see the three main Antarctic species. Every now and then, sort of a visitor will pop up. I don't want to raise that false expectation, but we do get to see the very classic tuxedo-looking Adelie penguins, very friendly, amiable gentoos. Here you can see them on their chicks. The penguin chick is the only creature that I know of that's cuter in person than you will see in the stuffed animal version of it. You can't make one cute enough. They are incredibly attractive and fun animals to be around. Here we have chinstrap penguins as well, and those are the three main species that we would expect to see, although, as I said, every now and then we get visitors from other species in Antarctica. We maintain our distance from the wildlife. We follow the Antarctic Treaty Guidelines for maintaining a distance of about 5 meters, 15 feet from the edge of rookeries, and a longer distance from sea mammals. We insist that our guests follow those guidelines. But you can see here that the penguins themselves are not beholden to those guidelines. They don't need to follow our rules. So if we sit ourselves in a clear section of beach and just be quiet and observe the wildlife around us, they will. They're naturally inquisitive. They are not afraid of us as predators, and the penguins will approach us and really display their natural behavior for us. Here the Adelie penguins with the chicks that you would see later in the season in probably the late month of December or January. We do see an abundance of seals, especially as every week in Antarctica as the breeding cycle sort of accelerates and progresses. We see more and more marine mammals, and so we can expect to see some lounging elephant seals here on a beach in the South Shetlands. Throughout the season, we'll see the really deep south Weddell seal, quite beautiful here, resting on the shoreline. Looking here as well, the Weddell seal, the year-round resident of Antarctica, even when the sea ice, the great sea skirt of ice, should form around the continent. These seals will stay under the ice. They'll keep a hole open, a breathing hole that they will wear open with their teeth. Talk about an ice cream headache there. But throughout the winter, they keep a breathing hole open in the ice and guard those lifelines to oxygen. Here, this other seal with a gigantic, somewhat formidable head. Every season, we do get to a good view of these. These are one of the top predators of Antarctica, along with the orca, the killer whale. This is the leopard seal that is the great hunter of small seals and also of course, penguins. From the ship itself, it's a great platform to view the wildlife, to view the bird life, the penguins, and we do have quite amazing whale sightings and sometimes interaction. We're very cautious when we're around marine mammals, but the marine mammals are attracted to us as a ship. They'll come to investigate, and particularly this season we had the best sightings of orcas that I've ever seen. We counted at least 50 to 100 orcas around us, much greater numbers than we've ever encountered before, quite inquisitive and putting on clear shows and enjoying our reaction to that. They approach the ship. The ship does not pursue them, but again, as I said, they do not have any particular fear of us in Antarctica. In the zodiacs, we've come to quite close encounters with humpback whales, with minke whales, and with orcas as well. Our naturalists know how to safely view these, and even these, especially later in the season as they become quite placid, having put a lot of blubber on, they will come to investigate our zodiacs. Here again at Plano, this whale coming directly at one of my zodiacs this past season, and they know exactly where we are. We just keep the engine purring softly. We're not under power, and they will be sure to either avert from us the last minute or to pass under the zodiac. And that's quite a feeling to know one of the great whales is just below you. The Antarctica is a paradise for beautiful bird sightings. Not everybody that goes down to Antarctica by any means is considered a birder or a twitcher, but everybody, once they're down there, becomes interested and knowledgeable and involved in seeing the great bird species, in addition to, of course, the penguins, which we see and smell by the thousands every day that we're down there. Here, a perfectly white, beautiful snow petrel, and the great albatrosses, the great aviators of our planet's oceans. We get a great chance to see these on the voyage south when we're crossing the Drake Passage, our 2-day crossing the Drake Passage, and I'll cover that a little bit later, but here the very serious aviator, the black-browed albatross, the fantastically adroit flyers, the light-mantled sooty albatrosses, the blue-eyed shag with its intense blue rim during the breeding season and yellow carbuncle are not great aviators, but they are seen in our visits on the shoreline and on the rocky crags surrounding the landing sites. Antarctica is a continent unlike any others in that it's completely ruled and governed and shaped and dominated by the ice sheet, by the glaciers, by the snow cover on it, down to its very edge. The places that we visit are just incredibly small openings that allow us to step onto the islands and onto the continent itself, on the peninsula, and the shapes and textures, the color of the ice, the quality of the light off the surface and refracted through the icebergs cannot be described or really conveyed adequately in these photographs. That is the thing I think that many guests carry away from Antarctica, that they never expected the beauty and the light that remains with them at an unconscious level when they return later. We do move out amongst the ice. I'll cover that a little bit later when I give you a typical program down there, but we get to appreciate in its immensity and its variety of forms and the beauty of shapes. People become ecstatic. They find themselves surrounded by a wilderness, an enormity of nature that they never expected. I say that in Antarctica, a 10% slice of the view down there would be a treasured national monument in the United States. And yet it's not just a 10 or 15% view. We have it in 360 degrees surrounding us when we're there. And I think it's overwhelming for guests. The light, should we get a beautiful sunset or a sunrise, because we have near 24 hours of light down there in the months of December, January into February, we have extended sunsets that last on the order of hours, and then a beautiful afterglow and pre-sunrise and sunrise. So it's constantly changing qualities of light off the ice. Golden and red-colored glows underneath high clouds catching the light that's already, the sun that's already over the horizon, and the colors of purples, blue, and indigo on the ice. This is the Lemaire Channel. It's one of the great channels that we go through. Everything is ice dependent. Should it be ice clogged, we go to other channels such as Neumayer, Herrera, or Anvord Bay. It is not unusual to be out at this photo. I'm sure it was taken after midnight, to find guests that are sort of energized by the light. They want to be up for the next morning, the 8 o'clock departure in the morning, and yet they can't get themselves into their cabin because the light is ever-changing and fascinating. Antarctica is the world's last great wilderness. When we make a visit to the Antarctic Peninsula, we are only landing on a speck, an open, rocky shoreline, or an ice-free island that we can get to. We see only a tiny percentage of it, and yet it is enormous, as large as the continental U.S., and as I said, completely dominated by snow and ice. We do a number of activities when we're on shore. We like to lead hikes when we can. They have to be very carefully selected and sort of accompanied, because everywhere is crevassed by the glaciers, and we have to make sure that when we get up to a vantage point, that we do it safely as a group, well guided by our naturalists who have been to these locations before. Here's a view over Anvord Bay, Nico Harbor, which was an old whaling site back in the 19-teens and 20s. Now it's just us and the penguins and some sea mammals. But the views up there are breathtaking. This past season we had somebody propose up there and present the ring, and it could not be a more beautiful place to ask somebody to spend the rest of your life with. Here's a view over what's known as Paradise Bay, and I think it's explanatory. The range, and there are a number of landing sites and zodiac tours that we make in this body of water, Paradise Bay, with the former Argentine station of Almirante Brown just below. As I said, we lead hikes. Our guests never cease to astound me. I think we're going to get 20 or 30 participants, and we have over 70 to 90%. We'll go up at least to one of the vantage points. Guests need to be somewhat fit, although, as Dale said, our average age is usually retired or semi-retired. I do like the programs around Christmas and into early January, when we have a number of younger guests, families, grandparents bringing their grandchildren on for the ultimate white Christmas experience or white holidays experience. Now, a typical voyage, departing, of course, from Ushuaia, the southernmost city, they'd like to say, in the world. You can see in the upper left-hand side. We get guests on in the afternoon. Quickly, we have to do the required safety drills. Quite exciting, and we are prepared to go down across the Drake Passage to World's End. The Drake Passage is a necessary transition to get to the White Continent. It generally takes us a day and a half to 2 days. After we travel from Ushuaia through the Beagle Channel, we get out onto the Drake Passage. It can potentially be one of the world's most, say, three-dimensional bodies of water. The quality of the trip varies greatly. I've been across some that are completely becalmed, what we call a Drake Lake. Usually we have a moderate swell coming from the west, sometimes rougher conditions, but generally people are well prepared for it. We give an adequate, a very clear briefing for our cross, and we have a program on the southbound program. It gives a chance for some guests to rest up from their travels down from North America. We have excellent birding opportunities. We begin our lectures with Seabirds of the Drake Passage and a history lecture on board, and we get to prepare guests for the logistics of landing and for the guidelines for going ashore in Antarctica. So here we are on a nice, maybe almost a typical Drake Passage. We get to see the greatest aviator of the planet. Here's a view of the wandering albatross that has a wingspan from tip to tip of up to 11 feet. And you feel ennobled when you see one of these great soarers above the swells of the Drake Passage. And we get them, they approach the stern of the ship quite closely to keep an eye on us and to follow in the draft of the ship and to use us for their dynamic soaring. The black-browed albatross accompanies us for great distances south, and one of my favorites, the light-mantled sooty albatrosses from South Georgia. We've seen a good number of those, a surprising number this past season. On the southbound, we will introduce passengers to the importance of protecting the wildlife and the environment. We do an antiviral, antimicrobial cleaning of the boots that we wear ashore. We make sure we remove all seeds and so on in compliance with the Antarctic Treaty guidelines for visitors to Antarctica. And we have, and it also gets guests in the spirit of visiting and protecting a place that people feel privileged to visit. We may make several stops in the group of islands known as the South Shetland Islands. They're just north of the Antarctic Peninsula. Here's, I think, our first landing of this season on a beautifully calm day. I wish all days were so calm, but guests are well prepared. In this view, the South Shetlands would be this group going from somewhat to Deception Island over to Elephant Island. And here, we're visiting a volcanic island. Here, you can obviously see the crater, the cone within the cone at Penguin Island. Might be a possible first visit, and guests making a climb to the top of Deacon Peak there. Another volcanic island, quite famous, is Deception Island, Whalers Bay. I can't say that we make usually on every trip we do make a visit there. I can't guarantee it, depends on ice and wind conditions, but a location known as Telephone Bay here, and you see the enormity of the landscapes. This is a hike of only about 20-25 minutes that brings us up to the edge of one of the side vents of this still active volcanic caldera. And Deception Island is known for an opportunity to dip, supposedly in the volcanic waters. Yes, they're volcanic. They're slightly warm on some days, but it will still take your breath away. But we do have guests go in for a supervised dip if they are brave enough into the icy waters at Deception Island. We get down to the peninsula, and every program is different, but on the expeditions that I lead, and I like to, I'm glad that I can select my own itinerary, I do try to bring guests into what's known as Iceberg Alley, and even down into the Weddell Sea, if ice conditions permit. to areas known as Paulette Island, shown here, another volcanic cone, and to view the great slab-like tabular icebergs that you can see here, pieces of the ice shelf that have broken off. A beautiful day on Paulette Island. What looks like salt and pepper across the background here are rookeries of Adelie penguins by the tens and maybe even hundreds of thousands on Paulette Island. Another place that we visit on the peninsula, Brown Bluff. This is a continental landing, stepping foot onto the peninsula is one of the possibilities. There's just too much to show and see down here. We see not just the obvious beautiful Adelie penguin chicks, the yawning Weddell seals and the Adelie penguins, but up in the left-hand corner, the forest of Antarctica, the lichens that can be up to 400 years old, that take decades, if not hundreds of years, to grow down there. So we see and appreciate things both great and small. We lead hikes up onto the graded edge of a glacier here at Brown Bluff, for example, with the Iceberg Alley in the distance. And again, as we get further down into the peninsula, into the more protected areas off of the Kurlas Strait, we make visits to some places such as Nico Harbor, where the backdrops are incredible, and sometimes into becalmed areas. We see Paradise Bay once again would be another type of visit. Now, although we go down there not to see humankind, humans do have an established both history and presence on the peninsula. Elsewhere on Antarctica, there are no towns there, although we have scientific and historic research stations. On the peninsula, I do like to include at least one station visit in the course of a 5-night program, and a great possibility might be the historic station at Port Lockroy, a British station. It was established in the 1950s. It has a small museum. It is staffed by 3 or 4 during the austral summer. So we get to see some of the history, the meteorological research that was done there, the atmospheric research and displays of how difficult life was for these researchers. You see the entire station on the right. And yes, Her Majesty's Post Office is still active there. We can send postcards from Antarctica and buy some small items at the station to support the work of the Antarctic Heritage Trust down there. Another visit might be to either Vernadsky Station, shown here. This is a former British station, and it is now run by the Ukrainians, continuing to work on atmospherics and monitor the ozone hole. Ukrainian station could be one of our stops. I'd love to visit it. It is the southernmost bar in the world. They make their own vodka, if you can believe it. You may believe that, at the Ukrainian station. At the bottom, the 2 photos are from the American station, Palmer Station. It is a great privilege to visit this. It's our American tax dollars at work. We cannot just lightly stop in at the station. We have to go to the National Science Foundation. But generally, we get about 2 approved visits per season. And if by chance that's on a particular program, it is a great and worthy visit to see the research that's being done down at Palmer. And they have the best brownies and coffee at this side of the Antarctic Circle. Plano is another beautiful stop on a trip. This is an area where the icebergs are somewhat corralled into a protected spot, and our Zodiacs get out to see fantastic forms of ice. We have to maintain our distance from these because they are ever-changing, sometimes capsizing or collapsing, producing quite dramatic responses from wildlife and from passengers, but we maintain a safe distance from this. And of course, a great place to take a group photo. This makes me a little nostalgic. I can see Smith Island on the left-hand side of this photo on a clear night as we head back northbound across the Drake. I always make sure that I'm on deck to get that last view of Antarctica